Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In this lecture, we will discuss web server attacks and we will discuss the following topics: understanding website architecture, web server attacks, top 10 web hacking techniques in 2019, and how to protect against common web server attacks. Okay, so before we go to the web server attacks and web attacks, we will discuss or have basic understanding between the client web server interaction and the URL. What does the URL mean and the structure of the URL. So firstly, how web traffic works. You are a user and you want to visit website like google.com. So what's the interaction that happens until you get the web page on your screen? So firstly, the user enters website address into the web browser. You put www.google.com and the user computer sends DNS request to the DNS server. Why is this? Because you know you are a user, you are a human being, you know the letters google.com, but you don't know the IP address for that website. So the DNS will do it for you. It will translate the IP name to the IP address, and at the end it will give you the IP address. So now you have the IP address of the website that you want to visit. You need to create a connection between you as a client and the web server. So you will create something called socket. What's socket is combination of IP address and port number, like the IP address of Google and then 80 if it is using port 80. Now you have created the connection and the connection is successful. You send HTTP GET request to the website, okay, for the web page you want, and you might get one of these responses. You might get this response 200, it means it's okay, and you will get the feedback on your screen, or you get 404 error, which means that the page that you requested for is not found. It means the page not found. Or 403, it means access denied. You cannot access. You don't have permission to access this page. Or 302, it means this object or this web page has been moved to somewhere else. Okay. In order to understand more, let's see this diagram. You are the user and you will enter the URL you want to visit. And it will go to the DNS server and the DNS server will give you the IP address. And after you get the IP address, you will enter you get the socket, which is the connection. Now you send HTTP request to the web server and the web server will give you response. You might get the web page you are asking for, or you might get 404 or other errors. Okay, so this is the interaction between the client and the web server. Okay, this is the client and this is the web server. So how they interact? Firstly, they create a TCP connection. TCP connection means the TCP/IP three-way handshake. You have studied the three-way handshake protocol previously in many networking courses and introductory security courses. You know the TCP/IP, the TCP three-way handshake. Okay, now there is a connection between the client and the server. The client will send request to the web server. The web server will send response, and after they finish this, they need to close the connection. So they create connection, client will send request, server will send response. After they finish interaction, they close the connection. Okay, so now it's clear how the client and the server will interact and how you will see the website you are requesting for in your screen. Good. Now we talk about the URL components, the link. What does the link mean? What is the components, the parts of this link? We start with the scheme. Scheme means what? Scheme means the protocol we are using, whether it's HTTP, HTTPS, or anything else. This protocol is followed by colon and then two forward slashes like this. So you have the protocol, colon, and two forward slashes. This part we call it scheme. After the scheme, we have something called the domain or the host. And we have the domain, which is this one, and the top level domain. Top level domain, it depends on the nature of the website. It might be .org, organizational. It might be .com, commercial. It can be educational, and so on. Okay, so this is defined by the nature of the website. Before this domain part, we have something called subdomain, which is here in this example web. Subdomain, it's optional subdivision of the main domain. So we have a big domain. It might be divided into subdomains, smaller domains, and the subdomains are put before the domain itself. Okay. Port number, which is optional. It defines the port number in which the web server will listen, and then the path or the file in which the web page exists, like for example the HTML file, and then the path segment parameters, this ID, this parameter. It might be, as I said, it might be optional. Okay, and the last one is the query string. Query from itself, so true, false, and usually we find this part only in dynamic pages. It's optional. Okay, it's optional. You might see it in some websites but not in other websites, and it's like query based because it has true and false, and usually it's used in dynamic web pages. So to sum up, we have these parts. Firstly, the first part, which is scheme. The scheme defines the protocol followed by colon and then two forward slashes. Then we have the domain and the top level domain. Here we have the subdomain. If the domain is divided into multiple divisions, subdomains, so it's listed before the domain itself. Then we have the port. In this example is 80, which is the port number that the web server is listening for. And then we have the path or the file in which the web page exists. After that comes the path segment parameter or the ID. And at the end we have the query string, which is used for dynamic web pages. So these are the parts of the URL. Okay, now we talk about web server attacks. From its name, it's attacking the web server. We have two types of web servers, which is Apache web server and Internet Information Server, IIS. So Apache web server and Internet Information Server. So what happens here? The attackers exploit the vulnerabilities that exist in the web server. So the attacker knows that there are some vulnerabilities in this IIS. So they try to exploit these vulnerabilities in order to attack the web server. Attackers can upload files or codes. They can upload what they do after they attack the web server. What might they do? They might upload files or codes or malicious code, viruses, infection to the web server. They might even crash the server, destroy the server, so it will no longer be accessible, or they might steal some sensitive information, private information from the web server. So it depends on their target, what they want to do from this attack. There is something called web-based authentication attacks. So they attack by bypassing authentication, gaining unauthorized access to the website. The attacker here, they don't have credentials to enter the website, but they will get unauthorized access. Usually done using brute force attacks. In order to get the easiest way to do to get access to the websites is through brute force attack. We will talk about it later. Okay, this part is not needed. Please remove it from your lecture. Okay, now we talk about 2019. What was the top or the most common web hacking techniques? Okay, the top web hacking techniques، يعني الطرق اللي كانت شائعة في السنة 2019 to attack web servers. نبدأ بأول واحدة اللي هي ال SEO spam, Search Engine Optimization Spam. Okay. What is the nature of this attack? The attackers add content like links and advertisement on normal websites. So you see normal website, you visit normal website, but the attackers here put some links to very bad websites. If you click on that link, it will take you to bad website, or it will show you advertisement that you don't want to see. So the traffic is stolen and directed to another site. Instead, the user is seeing your website, they will go to another website or the attacker website. If you are a user and you experience this, you go to a website and then this website takes you to bad website. What is the result? In future, you will not like this website. So it will create bad reputation. يأثر على سمعة الموقع. It will create bad reputation or it will damage the trust. This might be the first thing that might happen because of SEO spam. Or it also cut off organic traffic due to blacklisting. So you will be in the blacklist. So normal traffic cannot be seen. So this is what happens in the SEO spam. Attackers want to put some websites on the top list when you search on the search engine. They want to put their websites on the top list, okay, for search. So how they do it? This is one method. SEO spam. Okay, this is the first attack. Second attack is cross-site scripting, XSS. So what the attackers do here? Hackers can infect a website to trick browsers into executing malicious JavaScript. Whenever users visit that site, so the attackers inject some JavaScript inside the website, and then when you click on that website, the JavaScript will execute, it will run. So what you might see after that, you might see spammy or persistent pop-ups. You will see pop-ups that you don't want to see. They might steal sensitive data, or they might hijack the session when you are logged in. Okay, so in cross-site scripting, the attacker injects some JavaScript on a website, and when you go to that website or you click on some part of it, this JavaScript will start executing, it will start to run. You might see some symptoms like pop-ups, many pop-ups. It might steal your data and so on. So this is cross-site scripting. The third one is SQL injection. I'm sure that you come across SQL injection, and there is specific lecture for that. If your website has vulnerabilities in SQL database, they can access to your confidential information. So they make a SQL injection. They attack the database which is linked to the website, and they can control this database by doing SQL injection attack. Brute force attacks. So in brute force attack, attacker use something called, for example, rainbow tables or ready-made lists in order to try to guess the real password. طبعا سهولة البروت force depends on what؟ قوة الباسورد. If you have stronger password, it will not be very easy. But if you have weak password, then it's very easy to brute force. Or for example, if you have strong password but you reuse it, you use it for many times for many websites, then it will be also susceptible to brute force attack. اوكي هذا كان الاتاك الرابع او الهاكينج تكنيكس الرابع. الخامس اللي هي denial of service او distributed denial of service. Distributed denial of service is a way to make certain server unavailability. إذا تتذكروا ال confidentiality. Okay, so here it attack what? The availability of website. Okay, it wants the website to be unavailable. When the user want to access it, the attackers want that the web server will not be accessible by users. To do that, they use bots or botnets. Botnets, the attacker will attack many computers, and they use all these computers to attack a single machine, which is the web server here. So in order to make the web server inaccessible, they use many machines, we call it botnets, in order to attack single machine, which is the web server here. So these bots or these botnets send requests to the website. They send too many requests to the website, and then they make the website busy answering them. As a result, the server is unable to process all the received requests, and it will simply crash because we have too many requests at the same time. So the server will be very busy responding to these requests. At some point, it will not be able to respond to any of these or any of the normal user requests. So this is distributed denial of service. Backdoors. So the attackers want to access to the web server whenever they want. Okay, they want to make sure that this web server is accessible at any time they want. Okay, so what they do, it allows hackers to re-inject the victim anytime they want to enter to the victim. They are successful. Backdoors often work with the web shell interface. Hackers use an admin panel to modify the files and application on an infected website. For sometimes how they make sure that they can access to the web server anytime they need by modifying files, giving themselves permission, modifying the applications, and so on. Phishing, it's one type of social engineering attack. Okay, so in phishing attack, phishing implies the replication of the website with the aim of stealing money or personal information. What they do, for example, there is a very well-known website, like for example, Bank Muscat website. The attacker here create a replication of this website. They make a web page that is very close, looking the same as the original Bank Muscat website. So the users will not know. For example, they enter to the attacker Bank Muscat website, fake website, and they will not know it. Phishing. So they do it for stealing money, for stealing some personal information. For example, they ask you to enter the username and password on the fake website. If you enter your username and password, then they know their credential. Then they will use your credential in order, for example, to steal money or to get your personal information and so on. Example here, once a user enter his card details on a hacker will have access to that data and be able to use the received information for his own benefit. As I told you earlier, they use the fake website in order to steal some confidential data. Mailers, sometimes you see email, spam email. And usually the users or the attackers do not only send one spam email, they send many of them, thousands of these spam. So attackers sometimes want to send a spam email to thousands of users. They use mailers. So instead of sending one email for each user, they use some script to send thousands of emails to users without being known, okay, without you knowing the original sender. So most phishing attempts use mailer scripts. Of course, they can be detected that this is a small spam email, because you will see these the email providers will notice that all of these thousands of emails are coming from a single place, from a single source, and they can be blacklisted. شو يعني البلاكليستنج؟ اللي هو بينحط في القائمة السوداء. So they will not be able to send emails later on. Credit card stealer, they use these attacks to steal credit card details. So it's malware that steal credit card information, and it's done on websites, banking websites and online shopping websites. And usually it can be installed in client device or even the website, the e-commerce website. Okay, so usually the attackers inject attack in order to get the credential or the credit card details of some user, and it was very common in 2019. Here attackers want to attack to steal money. And how they steal money? From e-commerce website. You have to be very careful when you do any e-commerce, تجارة إلكترونية, when you buy online. You have to be very careful with your when to put your credit card. Firstly, you have to check the originality of the website or the app application before you do any other transaction. The last one, which is plugin vulnerabilities. طبعا plugin vulnerabilities شو سببها؟ الويب owner, the owner of the website. It's not created by the hacker or the attacker, no, it's created by the website owner. How? When the website owner use outdated component, أشياء منتهية الصلاحية, مثال they use old themes or unupdated plugins or extensions. So the attacker know that there is some vulnerability on these extensions, for example, and they know that the owner did not update the system, so they attack. Okay, so they exploit known vulnerabilities. So the best suggestion here for the website owners is to update their plugins, the applications they are using, the extensions, and so on to override or to overcome any possible vulnerabilities. اوكي، فالحين تكلمنا عن عدد كبير من الاتاكس. طبعا هذه ما كل الاتاكس، هذا بعض الاتاكس. If you want to read more about the attacks please go ahead. اوكي، بس هنا اعطيناكم مختصر common attacks only. اوكي، الحين how to protect against web attacks, how to protect your computer, your web server, and so on. So protecting against web attacks is time-consuming task. It takes too much time. You must protect all aspects of your system. It doesn't mean you only protect your website. No, you have to protect different aspects of the system. So what you need to protect in order to have secure and strong web server? Firstly, you need to protect the operating system, the web server application, the design, website design, and the network architecture. So we have different aspects. Okay, starting with securing the operating system. How to secure the operating system, whether it's Windows or Windows Server or Linux, and so on. Okay, so the first point is the selection of the web server is important. Which web server you are using? Is it IIS or Apache? So you have to search which one is more secure and use it. Operating system configuration is also important. The configuration of the operating system, the settings. List of tasks to perform on your server operating system. Change and rename your default accounts. Don't use guest account or change the administrator account name or the root account name. Use login password for sure. Don't allow everybody to access, but they have to put some username password. Uninstall or unused applications. If there is any application that you are not using, remove it because it might create vulnerability. Disable all unneeded services. If there is any service that you don't use on your web server, remove it because it might target some attacks. Disable access to programs such as CMD, command execution. Okay, because the attackers can use it to control your system. Start the web server with the lowest access privilege. نعطي أقل الصلاحيات الممكنة. Give them the lowest privilege, the lowest permissions. Configure allowable ports such as port 80 and port 443. Configure the ports, which port to use, and so on, whether to use HTTP or HTTPS. Install antivirus and intrusion detection system. Monitor the log files. From time to time, you have to check the logs files to know which activities are suspicious, which activities are normal, and so on. So you have to review the log files from time to time. And also you have to apply all latest updates. You have to update the applications, the operating system, all the tools that you are using, you have to update them. Now, how to secure the web server application. Even if you have very secure server, unsecure application can render the whole server insecure. So you have to check each and every application whether it's secure or not. For example, IIS buffer overflow issue allow remote command prompt to access web server. For example, IIS was having some overflow, some vulnerability, which is buffer overflow. So if they conduct this attack, they can have access to the web server. Now, what is the steps? The generic steps to protect the web server. Uninstall or unused web application features. If you have any features that are not used, that you are not using, remove them. Start the service with the least privilege needed. Give it the least privilege. Enable logging, as I said, with the operating system. Track the activities. Removed all unused web pages. When there is a web page in your website that's no longer used, remove it, delete it, get rid of it. Install or update it, all updates and hotfix patches. If there is new update to the IIS or the Apache server, make sure that you update it directly, because especially if this update is meant for bug fixes. If it is for bug fixes, then you have to run it as soon as possible, because if it has bug fixes, then it remove the security vulnerabilities and so on. Securing the website design. To reduce the risk, a website designer should follow these basic steps. Input validation. When you ask the user to enter anything in the website or in a web page, like for example, you ask him to enter his name, make sure that he is entering characters, not code, not JavaScript, and so on. So, input validation, you have to check the data that the user enter inside forms. Input validation on all data returned to client. Also, the data that are returned to client have to be checked. And encrypt cookies. The cookies store very sensitive data. So you have to encrypt the cookies as well, because cookies might store details like credential, username, password, so on. So you have to encrypt these cookies inside the client machine. Okay, don't put it in plain text, because if attacker access to these cookies file, then they know secret information that they shouldn't see. So cookies have to be encrypted. This is very important. Cookies have to be encrypted. Don't store it in plain text, otherwise it will cause issues. The web designer must employ specialist penetration tester to probe test the website and highlight the design vulnerabilities. Usually, before you publish your website on the internet, you have to ask penetration tester to come and check whether your system is secure or not, to find out the vulnerabilities that you have. For example, they might see, for example, SQL injection attack. You might see that your website is vulnerable to SQL injection attack, so they will tell you and you will know, and you will fix it. For example, the vulnerability tester will tell you that, oh, sorry, penetration tester will tell you that your system has no enough input validation. You ask the user to enter, for example, his name, but you didn't check which data the user is entering. So prevent them from entering code or long strings and so on. Okay, the last aspect is securing the network architecture, شكل الشبكة. تركيب الشبكة is very important. Where to put your web server is very crucial. So where to put your web server? You should place all web servers on a separate network. هذه ضرورية جدا. وين أحط الويب سيرفر؟ نحطه في شبكة مستقلة نسميها demilitarized zone. Okay, if you see, this is the private network. Okay, and this private network is protected with a firewall, and you see this is the public internet. So usually DMZ, demilitarized zone, is between the private LAN and the internet. Okay, it sits between the private LAN and the internet. Usually it's between two firewalls. This will control the incoming and outgoing traffic from and to the demilitarized zone. So also we put with the web server the IDS, intrusion detection system, to detect whether there is any intrusions here in this network. So usually we have to put the web server on a demilitarized zone, in protected zone, not with the private LAN, because if you put it here, then if there is any infection, it will infect all the network, entire network. Okay, so the location is important to prevent all traffic except traffic allowed by the rules. طبعا I use firewall and I put rules to define which traffic is allowed, which traffic is not allowed. So that was lecture 4, and in this lecture we talked about web servers, how the traffic manipulated. We also discussed about the URL, and then we discussed about web server attacks. We talked about 10 attack techniques, and we finally talk about how to secure the web server. What are the aspects that you need to protect in order to secure your websites, web server. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any inquiry, please contact your instructor. Thank you very much.